running for lieutenant governor again. And you ran last time against Dan Patrick.
Dan Patrick.
What was the margin of error there?
4.8%.
So you would have knocked him off if you'd gotten about 5 more points on the poll. So,
that's right.
Where did most of your support come from during the campaign? Was it the big cities or was it rural?
No, actually, I did better. We all know Beto O'Rourke, my friend. I did better than Beto in 2/3 of Texas counties.
And he visited all 254 counties.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they didn't like him in some of those counties, huh?
Well, I'll let others have that comment, but I would say that the folks in rural Texas responded very well to me relative to other Democrats that have run.
Right.
And I attribute that to the fact that I'm campaigning then and now very much on issues that matter. The lieutenant governor's role is a technical role.
Right.
People want a lieutenant governor
when you say it's a technical
solve
role,
problems.
When you say it's a technical role, a lieutenant governor runs the Texas Senate.
Well, that's right. It's the most powerful position, and so what Texans want is a lieutenant governor that will solve problems. Okay. And we got plenty of them. In 2018, I spent a lot of time talking to the public education community. I'm very passionate about education, teachers and retired teachers, and that was the source of my support. They did a lot of campaigning for me. Dan Patrick raised a lot more money than I did, but teachers worked a lot more harder for me than did for him.
Right.
And now we have more issues to deal with. We have a grid to worry about, for example. We have to get to the other side of COVID, although I feel pretty good about that. Energy is very important.
So let's talk about COVID for a second.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, you know, I'm an outlier in the media space in Texas, where you have Evan Smith with the Texas Tribune, and he relies on all his leftist donors to keep the Texas Tribune going. I rely on small, hardworking businessmen, local business. The majority of our revenue comes from small business. I mean, companies that are less than 300 people employed. And so I have a different outlook because I'm a small business too.
Right.
And when we talk about COVID, it knocked out like a very big vertical of mine, because we don't have Amazon advertising with us, but they're destroying all the retail shops. You don't see toy stores in strip malls anymore. You know, you see things like restaurants, you see things like bars, you see like basically service industry.
Right.
And that's the majority of our advertisers. Well, it knocked out the bars and restaurants for us. I mean, just destroyed them. And in fact, we have a story that's going up this week about a restaurant that was a startup before COVID started. And even though you know, they were able to take advantage of a lot of the programs, that, you know, it killed all their momentum. And so they're shutting down. So we have a lot of situations like that. How do you think Governor Abbott handled? I mean, he was the one putting out the edicts at the beginning. How do you think he handled the COVID?
Well, I'm going to talk about Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, because I think they're both.
You got to talk about your
Abbott. Abbott is the guy I'm running against.
Right? No, you're running against Patrick.
But I would say.
You're
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm running against Patrick. No, I've been very critical of their response to COVID for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that the right answer was better communication, so that folks understood the science, that they knew why we were.
But let's talk about communication.
No, wait just a minute, Joe.
But we don't believe anything anymore. Everything's like so discombobulated on that. One week they're coming out saying wear a mask, the next week say, well, it doesn't matter. The next week
Joe,
that's 2 masks.
Joe, that's exactly my point. That is exactly my point, because it was politicized.
And who politicized it?
I believe.
Who politicized?
Well, there are a lot of people that politicized.
Okay.
I believe that if Abbott and Patrick had been doing their job and knew how to do this, and in business we deal with these sorts of things all the time.
Okay.
You communicate, you motivate, you measure. You don't take away people's individual liberty. You don't take away their freedom, but you measure, you communicate, and you motivate. And they did a terrible job. They allowed it to become a political statement. I have always believed that if Texans understood, you wear a mask and you keep your distance, not to protect yourself, you do it to protect the other guy. Texans would have been much more focused on that. And I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a medical guy. I knew the answer was the reason why we wear masks was respect of other people. I mean, I think most people did. Well, you did, but you also said you're an outlier earlier. I think a lot of people thought that they was just about protecting themselves, not understanding that they were protecting others. Also, there was an impact on the lethality of the disease. If we had overwhelmed our healthcare infrastructure because people weren't properly informed and made bad decisions.
But did we really overwhelm it?
We came awfully close.
Right.
We came awfully close.
But how do you hold a public official responsible for a virus. Because a lot of people, you know, I'm a college-educated guy, and I read, a virus is gone a virus.
Look, if you're the CEO of a large business, and this is my world, is business,
Right.
you're dealing with things that are largely beyond your control, but you still have to get the organization to perform. And you can't dictate your terms. You do it by communicating,
So should
by
Abbott,
measuring, by motivating.
so Abbott should have just motivated everyone to wear a mask for their own goodwill and kept everything open? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't like the shutdowns. I think the important thing, first of all, I favor local control. And so the
But
response,
Abbott pretty much allowed local control. The county judges.
well, he allowed local control until he didn't like the answer, and then he took over local control, which I don't
Well,
support.
I think he didn't like the answer in the big metro areas, like what Jenkins was doing, you know, Judge Jenkins in Dallas County, or what, who's the judge in Harris County, Hidalgo? They didn't like what they were doing there. He was trying to say, hey, you guys got to open
No,
up.
Joe, I don't think the Republicans used to believe in local control. Jenkins,
But
Hidalgo,
Jenkins and Hidalgo
they were-
are leftist activists.
they're voted by the voters.
They want to shut down their economies.
Joe, they're voted by the voters, and the
Of
voters
course.
will hold them accountable.
Of course.
That's what local control is all about,
You
is
think that they're
accountability.
going to hold them accountable, which we'll go bring to our next
Well,
thing.
they
We're going to
will.
move ahead. We're going to move
Okay,
ahead.
whatever you like to do, Joe.
So do you really think that the November election was fair and honest?
I have seen no evidence, none, zero, to suggest it was not.
I have seen no evidence that anyone has ever looked into the evidence. That's my problem.
You're attempting to prove a negative, and you'll never get there, Joe.
I'm not trying to prove a negative either. I just want to know what happened. And here's what I think happened. It kind of goes into an interview you had with my friend Evan Smith's publication over there, the Texas Tribune, which, by the way, we're the rural version of that. We get just as much traffic as the Texas Tribune.
Okay.
You know, where you said that this new, it's HR, is it HR1, HR2, the new voter
SB7.
SB7, it's Senate Bill 7.
Right.
They're coming out, and they have some more guidance, let's say, on how to hold
Yeah,
elections.
it's a bad bill.
Oh, you think it's a bad bill?
Oh, it's a terrible bill.
I want more guidance on elections.
Guidance, I don't mind.
No, you do mind
But
it.
people traipsing in with video cameras, intimidating voters, making it impossible for some communities to vote. It's a bad bill.
You know, you were Biden's senior advisor.
Senior advisor for the campaign.
In Delaware, I have a list here. In Delaware, okay, if you want to compare the Texas law to Delaware, there's 5 points, okay. One of the things, and actually the governor's, the Georgian law, right, which is a little, you know, Trump said last night on TV that's a watered down version. He would prefer a stronger version of voter reform or ballot reform. But in Georgia, you have 19 days of early voting. In Delaware, you have 0.
Joe, I'm not sure why we're debating Delaware and Georgia. I'm focused on Texas,
Well,
my friend.
what I'm getting at is we still have early voting in Texas. We have 0 in Delaware. That's Joe Biden's place.
I think early voting is good. I think
Okay.
extended hours is good. I think mail-in voting is good. I think having polling places is good.
But why are we?
I think
why are
having
you-
poll watchers out is good.
Why are we criticizing Texas and Georgia, these southern states, for having 19 days of early voting when up there in Delaware, where your president's
Who
from,
says I'm criticizing that, Joe?
You are. You are.
No, you made that up, my friend. No, here's what I'm criticizing, Joe, if you'd like to know my point of view.
Okay,
Here's what I'm criticizing.
what are you criticizing on the
First of
elections?
all, in certain counties, there will be fewer polling places. That will make it much more difficult for voters in those counties to vote.
But that's not
point number one, Joe.
So wait,
Please,
so explain to me how
Point
it works.
number two.
Explain to me. No,
Point
let's
number
talk
two.
about the point number one. How are there less voting places in counties?
Well, if you go back and look at the folks who'd analyzed this, they're limiting the number of voting places in the large counties. No one's challenging that, Joe. Point number one. Point number two.
We don't have any problems. In fact, in Tom Green County, this is San Angelo,
Right,
Texas,
right.
We went to the voting center system. We went from the per precinct system to the voting center. Okay, so a voting center might cover 3 or 4 precincts,
Right.
but it has a whole lot more infrastructure to handle more voters to go through it. It's a lot faster. The other thing is,
Well, Joe, you've hit at exactly the
but
problem.
if
You've
you
hit
were-
on exactly the problem.
if
my
you
friend.
if you work on the south side of San Angelo, but you live on the north side of San Angelo, you don't have to leave work and drive all the way up to the north side of San Angelo.
But you realize that you're making my case for me, Joe.
No, the case
No,
is the
no,
case
yes, you
is the
are.
voting centers are still legal. It's no problem with it.
Joe, you're making my case for me, which is to say that there's a disproportional impact in various counties around the state. This is the concern. If you go to places like Harris County, like Dallas County, and these other places where you have a lot
where
of
they have
poor
where they have a
and
problem
minority
with voter
communities.
fraud. They have a problem with voter fraud in the big urban cities.
Show me the evidence,
You have,
and I'll consider it.
You have organizations that have started.
Who's
because
telling you
of
this,
the
Joe?
problems. I've lived through it. I worked campaigns in Houston. Harris County's voter rolls are a disaster.
Joe, you're making that up.
I'm not making it up.
I don't think this is
I'm
productive.
not making it up. Why would educated people, all right? Why would educated people in the aftermath of about the 2010 congressional election form an organization called True the Vote in Houston? You know why? Because they saw firsthand these suburbanites went into the inner city and they worked in some of these precincts,
Joe.
and they saw firsthand what was happening.
Joe.
Within the past 5 years, you've had election clerks from Harris County detail
Joe,
all the problems with the election rolls, and they won't. The Democrats will
Joe,
not allow you to fix it.
Let me challenge you.
I don't need to be challenged. I've been challenged myself on this.
Well,
a lot.
I don't think you're right.
I am
Answer
right.
then this: why is it that Attorney General Paxton has spent something like 22,000 man-hours looking for evidence of voter fraud and finding none? I misspoke. He found some Republican mischief.
That's good.
Otherwise,
I hope he prosecuted them.
Otherwise, he has found no evidence of fraud.
But that's not the full picture. In 2014, of course, I interviewed Governor Abbott. He was running for governor at the time, and he's just stepping down as Attorney General. I asked him those questions, and there's an article we can link to in the show notes here. You know how they have show notes now, right? But he said a couple things about voter fraud. He said he has worked several voter fraud cases as Attorney General. Of course, this is
How many votes?
5 years ago.
How many votes?
I don't know. I mean, he's worked
Well,
several.
we're casting
but
9 million, so how many?
The next thing he said is that polling on voter fraud, on enacting laws that further prevent shenanigans at the polls, are very popular. It doesn't matter what left or right, brown or white. It didn't matter. It was very popular. It polled very well. So,
Well, that doesn't interest me, Joe. That's a
interests
partisan political statement that you've made.
It interests me. Of course,
What you're missing,
it's true.
Joe, what you're missing is, and here's the big picture, and I think this is important. We are changing voter laws, or attempting to.
We're not changing laws.
Excuse me, Joe, please.
Changing laws. We want to keep
Joe,
the polls.
please.
We want to close the polls at 7 p.m. You know why we want to do that?
Please.
So that we can report on what's happening, so we can have transparency to our polls. Do y'all want to keep
Joe,
it open until 10 o'clock at night so you can have every ragamuffin in the world come in there and change the results?
I always enjoy
you probably have pallets full of ballots.
I always enjoy
outside
coming
it.
to talk to you, Joe, because I come away understanding your point of view. Occasionally,
I understand yours. You
No,
want
I
to
don't
suppress
think
the you want to dilute the vote of the Republicans.
No, not so.
Yes.
I think this is all about democracy
It's all
and
about
accountability.
It's all about diluting
sir.
votes. That's
It's
what
about
it is.
accountability.
Diluting votes with questionable ballots.
If you don't like democracy, that's a very different conversation. I am a patriot. I am for democracy. I want people to vote.
Don't tell your Democrat friends that you use that keyword. Patriot.
I
It might
want
trigger
people to
them.
vote
It might
because
trigger them.
that's how we hold Dan Patrick and the others accountable.
Right.
This is about corruption and accountability. We do not have a voter integrity problem.
I think we do.
If we do, show me the evidence, which you have not done, nor has anyone.
Okay,
Paxton.
I covered it.
This is to prevent accountability, Joe.
I'll give you some more evidence. I started my reporting career in Del Rio, Texas. Okay. It's on the border of Mexico. I don't know if you know a guy named Dwayne Jernigan, but he was the first Republican sheriff elected in a border county in 114 years. This happened back in '96. And one of the reasons why he did it, why he won, was because the absentee military vote coming out of Laughlin Air Force Base was, basically pulled the R lever. They all voted. They didn't care about the local guys. They were voting against Clinton. Anyway, that got me looking into a lot of election situations down there. What I learned, there's a voter harvesting methodology.
How many years ago was this?
This was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Is there any evidence of it happening now?
I'm sure there are some evidence, but they changed the laws. The Republicans, not the Democrats, changed the laws to fix this thing. But let me
So
explain.
you're satisfied now that it's working?
I think we need stricter laws. I think we
Why?
need stricter
Show me the
laws.
evidence.
Because what happened was we had a mayoral election down there. Okay, and the way to win
10 years ago.
The way to win an election in Del Rio, Texas,
10 years
was
ago.
to get 4 ladies to go through the barrio and harvest absentee votes.
Show me the evidence that it's happening now
I watched it
as a
happen.
basis.
I watched
That was
it
10
happen.
years ago, Joe.
And it's happening
And
today.
you said it was remedied.
It's happening today.
Show me the evidence.
If you look at the videos from San Antonio, from the Project Veritas guy, James O'Keefe, he
Do you consider him reliable?
He chronicled. Yes, I do. He had it on video. He chronicled it, and I've seen it before.
Has Paxton gone after it?
So basically, the fact that I've seen things, and I know it happened. You're telling me it didn't happen now because it happened 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. But it just happened again on this guy's videos.
Joe, I'm afraid.
I watch this
Look,
stuff.
Joe,
I've seen it.
Joe.
You have people that what they do is they have parties.
Joe.
And they say your admission to the party is to bring an absentee
Joe,
ballot.
I'm
If
afraid.
you or a ballot application. If you bring it
Have
here
you called
and you can come in
Paxton?
here and we'll feed you beer. We'll have you barbecue. You have a wonderful time. They all fill out their
Have you
applications together.
Have you
No,
reported
listen
this to
me.
Dan Patrick and
Listen-
gotten your $1 million bonus?
Listen to me. Listen to me. They fill out their ballot applications, and then someone at the courthouse, and you can't tell me this doesn't happen everywhere. Someone at the courthouse tips them off, says, "Hey, we just mailed out all
Joe,
the ballots."
this is
And then
this is the heart of the problem, Joe.
The
Because
heart of
you
the problem is
you
I
are
just-
trafficking in bad information.
this is stuff I've witnessed firsthand.
Joe,
Firsthand.
so have you
but you
called
won't even
Paxton?
listen to it.
Have you
You
called
don't
Paxton?
even want to know about it. So how can you tell me that you're sitting here, this big arbiter of great
Well, haven't you called
democracy?
Paxton?
I don't have any inline.
Have you heard
I'm
about-
sitting here next to a
have you heard about
candidate
Dan
who can
Patrick's-
do something about it, who can bring it to the forefront that voter ballot harvesting is evil.
Show me
It
the
is
facts.
evil. And this is
Show
what
me the
people do.
facts.
I just gave
Show
you
me
the
the facts in the case.
It's what I've seen.
I
I've
see
been around.
nothing.
This is what I've seen. I'm telling you what I've seen.
Why
as
haven't
a
you called
reporter.
Paxton?
This happened before Paxton, and I did talk to Abbott about it.
Well, terrific. Did you get your $1 million bonus out of Patrick?
Now that was for the November election. Now that was a totally
okay,
different
so
thing.
you're not talking about
wasn't that in
recent
Pennsylvania?
elections.
Wasn't that in Pennsylvania? He was going to give $1 million if he
Well,
won
no,
in
the
Pennsylvania.
guy in Pennsylvania knew that Dan Patrick was propagating
He called it. He called it.
misleading information.
Well, I don't think anything. When you tell someone that you're lying or you're seditious because you question the election of November, I question it still to this day. I think that was a dishonest election. I think there was wanton wholesale ballot harvesting. I think when Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook billionaire, dumps hundreds of millions of dollars into a few select voting centers, there are problems with our democracy right there. Because you know why? Just like what Paxton said, if all the voters are cheated up in Pennsylvania,
Joe,
and they choose the wrong president, they have cheated the voters of Texas. But the Supreme Court will not hear the case.
I'm sorry. I don't
We will not have an evidentiary evidence hearing
There is
on
no
any of
evidence.
this.
There is no evidence. Show me the evidence. You've presented
There's plenty of evidence.
in this court.
There's plenty of none of it has been heard. None of it has been heard. And that's why you have this country and this state fractured. And this is why you're going to have problems as a politician. People do not trust and they do not believe the November election.
Joe,
because
you are refusing.
Democrats
you are
refusing
refusing to show me the evidence.
You're
Who's being
refusing.
fractious
You're
here?
refusing, and these are small. The Republicans are doing small things. I mean, I would say the Texas Republicans are doing too little.
How would you like? Would you
shut
like
them.
to talk about the grid?
No,
Would you like to talk about things that
I
matter
want
to
to tell you
Texans?
something that Evan Smith wanted the Texas Tribune. That
Okay.
our election systems, the integrity of our election systems, are very important. And
I agree.
And the Democrats' case to open and broaden and have unverified ballots into our system is going to foment violence. I'm telling you right now, it is at the point where you're going to foment violence.
So
But
which
you're
one
gonna
of the
call-
two of us is here fomenting violence, my friend?
Well, I'm the one who has been harmed.
I'm the one saying, show me the facts.
I have been harmed. My candidate was cheated out of an election.
Show me the facts.
I was cheated out of an election.
Show me
I
the
feel
facts,
that way.
Joe.
I
Show me
feel
the
that
facts.
way.
I understand.
And you have not allowed what you do. If I say it, I am censored on Facebook. I am demoted on Google. I am shunned. I am told I am seditious. And you got the DOJ and the FBI going after these people for nothing. I mean, these people.
Joe.
I mean, for example, in
Joe.
Midland, Texas, we have a poor mom up there who's like facing, I don't know, 10 years in prison because
Joe.
she walked into the freaking Capitol on January 6th. Come on,
Joe.
these people were aggrieved, and you know what? The Democrats shut down all discussion. The liberals and
Joe.
the Democrats shut down all
Joe,
discussion.
I didn't come to West Texas
But that's the problem out
to
here. in
wade
West
into
Texas.
hyper-partisan
This is not
conjecture.
hyper-partisan. This
It's
is
very-
not
yeah.
hyper-partisan stuff. You have millions and millions and millions of people who feel
I'm
the way
here.
I do. Okay, so we have the problem with the election. I'm going to tell you that is a very, very sore wound. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about it, and there may not be like me who are unafraid to mention it.
The pledge that I'll make to you, Joe, the pledge that I'll make to you and everybody in Texas is that if you show me the facts in the case, I'll look at it objectively.
All this show me your facts. If you won't even have an evidentiary hearing, who cares about facts
There's
anymore?
no evidence.
At this point, it's all emotion. And now the Republicans are trying to make very small modifications. I mean, stopping the polls from going after 7 o'clock. Come on, that's not a big deal. The things in here are not a big deal. And
Joe, the things in there are very big.
And you're
deal.
attacking it. And by the way,
the things in there are very big.
If I'm against the SB 7, then I'm a racist. That's the next thing. You shut me down by saying I'm a racist if I'm against this stuff. No, but your side does. The Democrats do.
I'm here to talk about me, Joe.
Do you realize how upset? Do you realize how angry people are about that? And they can't say anything about it. They can't express it. I mean, this country's gone to hell because of this.
I would say, Joe, I'm here to talk about the grid.
All right, we'll talk about the grid.
I'm here to talk about public education.
All right, so while we're
funding.
fuming about the election, and then the next thing you know, the Democrats and their windmills freeze up in West Texas, and they freeze the hell out of us. So what say you?
Well, there's a lot of windmills in cold parts of the country. Have you looked at MISO? Do you know what MISO is?
What is MISO?
MISO is the Midwest Independent System Operator. Okay, so this is the ERCOT equivalent.
Okay.
And it comes as south.
And they have heaters on their windmills, right?
It comes as south as parts of Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken, but goes as far north and into Canada. They have a generation portfolio that's not dissimilar to ours in Texas.
Okay.
So they have all of the sources of electricity, including wind. They have a very large percentage of their portfolio is in renewable energy, wind and solar. And they operate in very, very cold climates, and they do just fine because they know what they're doing. And they know in their part of the world, if you have several days of very cold weather, the grid would shut down, except that they're winterized. Okay. And so it works.
I would argue that
the problem with
the propeller operators here weren't given enough money by the government to put the heaters on the windmills.
Well, it's quite remarkable to have a Republican talk about subsidies, but we could go down that path if you like.
Well,
I think there's a
lot of money here. There's a lot of money here with the windmills, so I got to be careful.
We've deregulated the grid. Market response is almost always the best, but the folks that produce electricity can choose to shut down if it gets cold, if they want to. That's free market.
Okay.
But if they all shut down at the same time, or 54% of them shut down at the same time, which is what my understanding is what happens, then the grid doesn't function.
Right.
And if the grid doesn't function, then we have in the world of hurt. Nearly 200 people died as a consequence of this, and there was not a surprise to the legislature. ERCOT had warned them in 2017 that if we had a cold snap, this would happen. In fact, they quoted as saying, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And so I lay the blame at the legislature. So we have to fix that. We have to winterize the grid. It's as simple as that. Will we do it? I don't know. That's what we'll be watching very carefully.
It costs money, obviously, but the other thing I would hope that we do.
Do you think it's money well spent, Joe?
No, not necessarily.
So you think a blackout do you know how close we came to having a complete blackout?
But I would hope that people would look into why the blackout happened. It was also a technical failure, okay? And
in terms of?
Well, you have to shed power as your power load decreases on the grid. You have to shed the power. You have to be ahead of the curve. From what I understand, they were not ahead of the curve, and that sends.
It didn't shed the load fast enough.
Fast enough, and that shut down some of these power plants. And when you shut down a power plant, from what I understand, talking with my Aggie engineer buddies who are in the business,
yeah, they know what they're doing.
When you shut down a power plant, you can't just turn a switch on; it comes right back on. You have to do a whole lot.
It's hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when it's 10 degrees outside. So I mean, there's a lot of factors that are involved in here, and I hope that we take into consideration the technical failures in addition to the policy failures. And what you can do is you can make both of them stronger if you look at it honestly. If I can trust a Democrat to look at something honestly, that's the thing.
Yeah, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised if you put the facts in front of them. They deal with things honestly.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they're politicians to begin with. I mean, they're all politicians, so we don't know. But then we got this
the thing to watch for, in my opinion,
is everything's politicized.
The thing to watch for, in my opinion, and I'll be watching very carefully, is setting aside how we got here. The question is, what are we going to do next? Will the legislature, or will they not, mandate that the grid be winterized and to be able to keep operating Or
And
will it be a head fake?
Will it really matter? I don't know. I mean, I think.
Well, that's what we need to watch.
You know, I think if all the windmills stopped, because the wind stopped, you can't.
And we should also talk about public education. The other thing I want to mention too is that.
All right, let's talk about public education because there's an issue I want to get to you about on this public education.
Well, before we get to that, if I may, Joe.
Okay, go for it. This is public education. Mike Collier.
There's an awful lot that's happened that might take people's attention away from public education.
Okay.
Like but not me.
The kids aren't in school because
of
COVID?
me. Not me. I am passionate about public education, remain so. If we don't get education right in the state, we won't get anything right, in my opinion. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that I haven't lost focus on that.
Right.
We do not have a permanent solution to the funding problem in the state.
No.
And that's what we need to work on. So, please, what's your question?
You know, one of the issues that you brought up in your last campaign, which I thought, as a Republican, I thought was fascinating. You determined that large real estate owners, which are big corporate
owners of large commercial industrial properties,
gigantically, like downtown Dallas skyscrapers and downtown Austin skyscrapers, were not paying their fair share in taxes.
Well, I didn't determine that. Rick Perry did.
They were, well, okay.
No, it's true.
Well,
and he formed a commission to try to solve this problem.
You made this the center of your campaign.
Well, I think Texans really are pleased with that.
Because they're like a guy in Dallas, downtown, let's say a Whole Foods in uptown Dallas would compare his building to a similar building in downtrodden Detroit.
That's right.
And so he'd get his $40 million property reappraised down to $12 million.
That's right.
And so therefore he wasn't paying his fair share.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you know, I've had this continuous investigation of Tom Green County properties, you know, after talking to you about it. And I'll give you an example of one of them. It's the Fairfield Inn and Suites. It's up for auction right now. But it was originally appraised for at $8.2 million, and the company that owned it, the REIT that owned it, went, you know, hired an Austin lawyer, and they sued the appraisal district here, and they said, "You've appraised this too high."
Right.
And it went through all the motions in court, and finally, the appraisal district has no resources to defend itself, so it just said, it laid on its back and said, "We'll go to arbitration." In arbitration, they reappraised the property back down to $2 million.
Okay.
So they lost $6 million in valuation, over $6 million. It's on the auction block today. You know how much that property is going for?
Tell me.
$2 million.
Okay.
So the system actually worked there. Now realize this is post-COVID, and there's a lot of other factors in there. But
many other factors.
But they're right there. The system seemed to work.
Yeah.
The allowing that loophole to stay in place.
I'm sure that you'll find examples where it does work. There are also an awful lot of examples where it doesn't work. Rick Perry was the first to discover this.
Right.
It's the result of a law that was passed in 1997 called the Equal and Uniform Law.
Right.
And whether it was intended to do this or not, I don't know, but it was immediately apparent that we had what
lawyers
was called
figure out ways to do things.
What was called a property tax death spiral. The concern was that we would not be able to fund public education without raising homeowner property taxes. That was beginning to happen. That was concerning, and it was Rick Perry who put together a commission, and they made recommendations to the legislature. These are the following adjustments that need to be made. Appraisal districts in the state went out and estimated the impact of this at that time. It was actually a few years later that they estimated it, 2006 if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
They estimated it to be $5 billion a year. Now nobody's done it. Even as recently as 2013, if I'm not mistaken, the Legislative Budget Board looked at it, wrote a report. It's called their GEER report, G-E-E-R, Government Effectiveness and Efficiency Report. And in the very back of the document stated and showed facts in the case, examples, the impact. So it's real, Joe. It's real.
Right.
And politics prevents them from closing that loophole.
Well, I talked to a politician about it. I talked to our state rep, Drew Darby. I said, "Why don't you go look at this loophole?"
Yeah, what did he tell you?
He didn't. It's been a while, so I can't remember exactly what he said. But the general gist of what we were talking about is that would be effectively another tax increase.
Well,
I mean, it's been in law for 30, 40 years. So I mean, since
okay, Joe. So the way I interpret that is, let's say that you and I live in a community, and you're paying your taxes, and I'm not. Right. And therefore, you pay more because you're paying on your behalf and my behalf. Right. If somebody comes along and says, "Mike, you're cheating Joe. You need to pay more taxes," would you feel good about the argument? Don't raise taxes on Mike.
But it's been on the books for so long that it would be considered a tax increase and may quell investment taxes.
Let me share with you what I think that he's really trying to tell you. Is that the folks that own those properties have lobbyists
Right.
And they don't want to start paying their taxes.
Right.
And these guys work for lobbyists and special interests. That's where they get their campaign money,
Right.
Joe. And
Are you getting your campaign money that way?
No.
You're not?
No.
So you're going to deny lobbyist money or PAC
Joe,
money?
they're not going to give me any money, and I'm not going to call them.
What about
There'll be some PAC money, folks that are concerned about public education.
and the grid?
No. The generators aren't going to give me money.
Okay.
No. There'll be some PAC money, but it'll be such as teachers
Right.
and labor. But it's not going to be the folks that own large commercial industrial properties. It's not going to be anybody. I can assure you that nobody in the energy sector is going to want to give me any money, because my job is to state the facts.
Right.
Even when we were dealing with that very, very difficult issue as to voter integrity. Shame on me for bringing it up again. I come from the business world, Joe. Show me the facts. That's all I ask.
There's so much smoke there, and there's so little investigation, so little curiosity by even our media, that,
Well,
I mean, it's there. I know it's there. And it is really difficult to report on it, because I've tried. It's very difficult to report on it. It's very difficult to find, and unless you have subpoena power of the government, or if you have a large budget, investigative budget, you can't do it. You know,
The worst thing that we could do,
but
Joe,
you get the
in my
one-offs.
opinion,
You get the one-offs, and you
the
look
worst,
at it and you go,
the
what's
worst
going
thing
on?
that we could do, in my opinion, Joe, is in the interest of advancing democracy, that we actually attack it and hurt it. I personally think that SB 7 and what Dan Patrick is doing and leading is designed to prevent us from holding him accountable.
I don't
corruption
agree.
in it.
I don't
think
agree.
it's all about accountability.
I see more corruption in things that it's not addressing. Like, I don't want Zuckerberg to dump $100 million into a voting center in Tarrant County and flip that thing blue.
Well,
when it
Zuckerberg's
shouldn't
not
be.
going to give me any money, I can assure you.
Oh, he'll give the money to the to get out the vote guys,
Well,
and they'll vote the Democrats in, because you guys are happy about all their crazy, weird stuff they want to do to our country and to our people.
Fix the grid.
Like, close our churches.
Fix the grid.
Wonton abortion.
I don't know why you're saying these things, Joe.
I mean, these are Democrat side. The
Fund public
culture issue.
education.
The culture war is going to get you, Mike Collier.
I'm not a culture warrior.
But you better learn how the culture war is going to get you, because that right there is the underlying bedrock of what's happening in our politics today.
Well, I would like to say, Joe, that you're the first reporter to start a culture war with me, but I won't go there with you.
Well,
I won't go there with you.
it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
We
because-
spar, Joe.
Because we can talk the issues, and I hope that the people out there can get more out of this than they would with a sycophant interviewing you from a big city newspaper who's pretty much on your side.
I think there's no question. The record clearly reflects that you are not a sycophant reporter. And you're a friend of mine, Joe.
Yeah, well, get on up to Abilene and
Will do.
and talk to them today. And this is Joe Hyde. I'm with Mike Collier. He's thinking.
Hey, Joe, I want to say one last thing.
Wait, go ahead.
If you're allowed to interrupt me, I'm allowed to interrupt
Go
you.
ahead.
I said this to you earlier, and this is true. I've been through San Angelo perhaps 25 times in my life, and never once has it been anything other than a beautiful, sunny day.
That's because
you
the
guys
weather's
are
always
so
good
lucky.
here. And until
guys are
the
so
windmills freeze.
For another day.
Anyway, Mike Collier is going to be thinking about running for lieutenant governor. How can they get a hold of you?
CollierForTexas.com.
Same
is
website.
my website.
Collier for Texas.
Same website.
All right.
This is just, it's a football, think of it in a football analogy. I didn't lose, I just ran out of time. That was halftime.
You got
we were nearly
outscored.
tied at the end of the second quarter.
You just got outscored. You didn't lose.
By a little,
Yeah.
but we have the second half coming up,
All
and
right.
we'll win.
I'm Joe Hyde with San Angelo Live. Thanks for joining us.